Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John.cullen and Brandon.allen.
Well, Brandon, a friend of the show on tonight, Shawn O'Neal, who some of the listeners may remember. Little trivia for the listeners. There's only been one time in the history of the Mental Advantage podcast where both of us were not on the mic, and this person stepped in when you weren't able to make it, and it was only because there was like some crazy scheduling thing or whatever. And I reached out to Shawn and said, "Hey, what do you think about jumping on?" And he was able to do it. So Shawn O'Neal, of course, who we're talking about, who's a high school teacher and mental performance coach from Long Island, and just really does a great job.
Yeah, he I think he's got an awesome outlook. I think the school system up there and the coaches that, he'll talk about some of the headway he's made on the mental performance side up there and some of the challenges that he still faces. So, but he's the right guy leading the charge, and super excited for him to be back on the show.
Absolutely. So get your pen and paper ready. Here's Shawn O'Neal. All right. Well, get ready, Ireland. We have your favorite son on the show tonight, and we have a treat for you. Friend of the show, Shawn O'Neal, our favorite school teacher and mental performance coach, is joining us tonight. Shawn, welcome back.
Hey, it's awesome. I believe this is my third appearance.
True. You had the only guest co-host appearance that we have had.
And I was fired immediately.
Yes, we said, you know what? Actually, we were more afraid that people were going to start calling in and requesting you. So we're very fragile here at the Mental Advantage podcast. So no, man, we're glad to have you back on, and you've been busy. Part of that has been your schedule. You've been doing a lot of things, I know, with Brentwood High School and some other clients there at the college level. Tell us a little bit about how that's been going. What have you been learning from your journey that as you've been, helping others?
I would say the most important thing I've gotten over the last year: don't assume you know what's going on in someone else's mind. And Brandon, this goes, I'm right there with you with the mindfulness meditation every morning.
Good.
And I've been not judging. And that's been a big part of my last year or so. Is I'm not coming in with judgments. I'm just going to listen and, ask some questions and go from there. So yeah, the idea of not assuming that I know what's wrong or what's right or what I can do, that's probably been my main lesson this year.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's interesting. We talk all the time about kind of meeting the client where they are and making sure that you are listening more than you're talking. I mean, in order to do that, and it's so critical for, whether you're a business leader out there, whether you're a coach out there, what Shawn is talking about there is just making sure you kind of, that first step to the GPS, where are you, right? Like, where are you at, so that we can now start from there as far as where we're wanting to go. And if you bring judgment into it, it makes for, because you could start telling them, guiding them down the wrong path. And, you're all of a sudden you're halfway down the road and you're like, oh, wait a second, maybe that wasn't the issue at all.
Well, yeah. And it's you don't want to bring expectations into any of it, because then you start having these confirmation biases based upon your belief system that you're bringing into it. So it's it's critical to kind of come in there open-minded and not trying to impose kind of your thoughts on it. So that's awesome to hear that, Shawn. I mean, it's made a huge difference for me, for sure. So it's cool to hear that you're doing that.
I feel like I'm the missing link in all of this, that both of you are so zen right now. And I'm just, you can only imagine all the thoughts that are racing through my head right now as both of you are just so dialed in. So
no judgment on those thoughts.
Yeah, we don't
go.
Nobody's hating.
Let them go. Let them pass,
that.
right?
That's it.
Standing on the street corner, watching those thoughts go by. I think that's a song, isn't it? It's somebody's song. So maybe
It should be.
If it's not, that's right. Well, speaking of which, you and I were talking a little bit earlier, Shawn, and you were telling me about what I think is a really cool thing, and I know Brandon will really be excited about this, is the work that you're doing with trying to get an entire athletic department, school, on board with all kinds of different stuff. I mean, especially with the mental performance. Talk a little bit about maybe how some of that's progressing and where you are in that stage and what your goal is for that.
Well, there's definitely a lack of mental performance here on the East Coast. And I reached out to a couple of colleges, and one of the great things that I've picked up is no. Like, people are, nope, not interested, don't want to do it.
We're good.
Yeah, sorry, nope, no time. And part of that non-judgment part was that, like, all right, next, and just go on to the next one and the next one. So I happened to move into a new building, and it just so happened the athletic director got moved into the same building. He's actually like down the hall from me.
Oh, wow.
So I went in and I kind of introduced myself, and he had known me because I've been there in the district for quite a while. And we just started talking about this, and he had this just strange look on his face. And he's like, how am I going to explain this to my coaches? I'm like, don't worry, I'll do it. So we're getting ready for winter sports here.
Okay.
So when they have the winter sports coaches meeting, I'm going to present. I've talked to a few of the coaches already. They're like, come on in, we'll see what we can do. And then the spring sports, I've been working with the baseball program all last year, so they already know. And those kids have actually been some of the best sellers because they're on other teams. So they're like, hey, we should bring Coach O'Neal in and talk about this, because he talks about like E+R=O. And well, better how. That's well, better how, guys. Well, better how. So that's kind of where it's standing right now. And they did ask me, what is the end game for this? And John, we talked about this. What's the end? And I said, I would love to teach this as a class someday. Maybe 3-4 years down from the road, write a curriculum and make it a half-year course and get 400, 500 kids through the program every year. That would be my ideal. So baby steps first, though.
For sure. So Shawn, it's awesome that you're given that opportunity, but I'm also curious as to the pushback. What is it? Is it a time thing? Hey, we don't have time. Like, why are you getting turned down when you bring this in front of people?
Mental performance isn't really a popular thing where I am right now. So when you say to someone you're a mental performance coach, the first thing they kind of lean towards is like, all right, so the girl in the Olympics with the mental health issues, that's what you fix. And I always tell them, I don't fix anything. I give people strategies to take them from where they are to where they want to be. So that first part, I think, is the misconception, because we have here a big push for social emotional learning in schools.
Okay.
And people have such misconceptions about it. They think it's like mental health, or they think we have to sit in a circle and hug and sing songs and stuff like that.
Right.
And then when I come in and I'm just like, no, we're teaching them strategies to make them self-sufficient. And that's what everyone's complaining about. Kids nowadays is they're not self-sufficient. They can't do anything on their own. Well, mental performance is teaching them how to do things on their own. So it's just a matter of being able to have conversations and then seeing it. I think that's part of it. And I've had a few coaches that see it, and parents have, pulled me aside, and that's where it kind of goes. It's like this one heard from this one. And I was out at our college summer baseball league. I was visiting a friend who was coaching, and I was talking to him about it. And one of the players in the dugout overheard our conversation, and he reached out to me on Twitter, and I'll be working with him next week. So it's just a matter, I think, if people get access to it, then they're more likely to do it. But we have to get over the misconceptions first.
Sure.
Well, you're exactly right. And I was kind of smiling that when they said, "Oh, is that what you fix?" Simone Biles. If you could do that, you wouldn't be working at school.
Well, he definitely wouldn't be talking to us. Damn sure.
I'm a lifer here.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been one of those things. It's like, no, trust me. If I could fix that issue with a lot of people, we're not having this discussion. So. One of the things, Shawn, I was doing recently, because we have Brett McCabe coming back onto the show, and later next month, December 10th, that show will air. And one of the things is I was listening back to that episode, and it goes right in line with what you're talking about there, because that starting point with any of the mental performance stuff is awareness, right? It's really sitting down and finding out. And we talked a little bit about this earlier about where they are. But one of the things that Brett was talking about on the show was just the idea of like, okay, finding out where you've been, where you are, and then more importantly, where you want to go. So one of the issues that I think we talk about all the time, and as we think about awareness, is we always say, knowing if you're in control or not, whether you're present moment or not, but really how aware are people when it comes to their progress towards their goals, where they want to go. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to talk a little bit about tonight, is just that importance of awareness. But then you and I talked a little bit about this today, and how you can almost bring in, that piece of, if I'm aware of when I'm starting to fall off course. Like, it's one thing to know, like, am I in control? Am I still in the moment? It's another thing to start figuring out, am I even on the same path anymore? Am I starting to maybe get burnt out, or I'm losing focus on maybe that end goal? What are your thoughts around some of those things?
Yeah, I definitely agree. The awareness point is so big, and we generally don't stop to allow the awareness. And Brandon, you've mentioned it a few times about, mindfulness and just sitting, and you were mentioning about working with the girls basketball team and getting them just to sit and have silence for a couple of minutes, and how weird it felt for them. Right. But that's the time that we get to reflect. And I think society has kind of pushed us away from that reflection period, and with everything's fast, and we need to kind of pause. And I think that awareness component is huge with that.
It really is. I remember going into a therapy session one time, and this was years ago. And my therapist said, "Hey, man," he said, we need to talk. And I'm thinking, oh, I feel like I have been for a year and a half with you, right?
Is that not what we were doing?
Yeah. Is that not what my checks were? Did they not clear? Like, what's going on? So he said, he goes, "Hey, I don't think I can do anything more right now for you." And I'm thinking, well, huh? Like that was just, I wasn't expecting that. And he said, he goes, in the past year, he goes, what's probably your biggest takeaway? And I told him, I said, well, I at least now know when I'm being an asshole. And he goes, he puts his hands up and he goes, "We're done." And I said, "What do you, huh? Like, don't we need to do something about me being an asshole?" And he goes, well, you have to do that. But the fact that you're self-aware means that you can now use whatever strategies we talked about to change your behaviors, but you have to be aware of them first. And so to your point, Shawn, I think it's critical, and it's for sure a cultural thing where very rarely do people have, introspective either time to process what their life or what's going on in their life or how they're actually feeling. Those are all things that are at times difficult to grapple with. And I've mentioned it before. Starting therapy, the therapist said, okay, so tell me all the emotions that you feel. And it was like 3, right? It was happy, sad, or mad. And he was like, oh, no. There's so much more out there. And so anyway, I don't want to sidetrack it, but I think the self-awareness is wildly important for sure.
No, I don't think you're sidetracking at all. I think what you just made me think about is how, to both of your points, Shawn, talking about the time and the busyness of everybody's schedule, is therapy, when you really think about it, is scheduled reflection. Like you wouldn't,
for sure.
Like you almost had to plan to sit for a moment, whether it's with a licensed therapist or not, but to reflect on what's happening in my life, like why I am doing what I'm doing, why I have the goals I have, why, like all of these why questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really interesting though, because I do think that both of you are, right on as far as the busyness and how people just don't take the time to just pause, and Shawn, you brought up well, better, how earlier. And I think that's one of the best reflection tools that we have. People can also do keep, start, stop. There's all sorts of different mechanisms there and outlines to be able to say, okay, what am I doing well? What could I be doing better? And then how am I going to do that? But if we don't take that time to do that self-reflection in the middle of all of this, whether we're implementing a new system or new strategy to become that best version of yourself, if you're not constantly kind of checking your pace to see, am I on track still? Is this still where I'm wanting to go? Because otherwise you're just going to get where you don't want to go in a hurry, because you're not all of a sudden you're not looking up enough times to make sure you're still on track. But I want to also bring into this, because one of the things that you were saying, Shawn, when we were talking earlier today and we started talking about awareness, is it becomes a question about expectation too, is, what were you after to begin with? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're a goal-driven society. And as a teacher, I've been guilty of this. What's your goals? And I think we give false impressions as to, number one, how to reach your goals or complete your mission. And then what happens if it's not all you expected it to be? Mm-hmm. Like, and I'm in a profession where, we get young teachers in, and they're leaving the profession, within 2 or 3 years, and they're like, this isn't what I expected. And it's like, well, what were your expectations, and how do you deal with it when you don't reach those expectations? And you hear people talk about, money can't buy happiness, and the more money you get in your career, there's different expectations, but it doesn't mean you're going to be happy. And that awareness component is there too, because you need to be aware when you're not happy and do something about it. Not just keep. The best I've ever heard about negative thoughts, Patty Steinfort said, it's like a beach ball. And if we keep trying to push the negative thoughts down underwater, it'll just pop up faster and harder the next time. So we need to be aware of when we're not happy, or when we're acting like an a-hole, or, we're, and then have a plan to deal with that.
So So where does that lie, Shawn? So, I mean, we've talked a lot about expectations. I talk to people in my personal relationships about, I try not to bring any expectations into a situation. And sometimes it drives people crazy when I say that. They literally get mad because they think what that means that you don't hold them to a high standard, right? That, oh, I'm not worthy of having expectations. And it's like, no, you're more worthy than me trying to put my expectations on you, right? But how do you, the teacher thing, it concerns me, right? Because I've got a daughter who's an education major right now in college, and um, I am very concerned about the profession and what her expectations are going into it. Is that something that at a collegiate level that they're not kind of introducing, like, hey, here's your challenges, and remember, you're going to be, probably part of a union. You're going to be dealing with administration that may be somewhat hamstrung in what they can do because of the parental influences and the Board of Education. I mean, do they properly teach those types of expectations or how to manage those expectations?
I can't speak to all education programs, but the ones that I've dealt with, no. They're like, here's how you write a lesson plan. Here's a curriculum. Here's a couple of things that you can do, pedagogy wise. And that's it. And it's not until you get to like student teaching where, and depending on your student teaching experience, sometimes you'll have a cooperating teacher that is literally like, all right, you're here, be quiet, watch, learn, I'm awesome, move on. Or you have the ones that are like, just, do whatever you want to do. and you need, I think we do need better mentorship programs, especially with teaching new teachers. I don't think a 6 to 12 week experience in a school is enough. I think they should do student teaching first. So they're not all the way through their program before they realize, like,
point. Yeah.
That is a great point.
This isn't what I expected it to be. And it's also the culture that they go into and the people that they're around. It's a very interesting profession because sometimes we're heroes and sometimes we're, the worst thing in the world. And, for me, I've learned to just kind of, I never get too high. I never get too low. I just kind of try to balance it out. It's still the best job in the world. And people look at me, and when like my coworkers, we have the lotto pool every Friday, and they joke that you'll still come to work even if we'd win.
Right.
Like, it's a great job. It's
right.
It's so.
Well, and go ahead.
I just, just let her know that there's going to be ups and downs, and but in the long run, that end game for me is more than worth it.
Sure.
Oh, I do think it's interesting that you made me think about motivational fit. So, when I'm hiring people, we talk all the time when you get trained on how, to find the right person for the right job. But motivational fit is such a big piece to that because it's what is the motivation of this person? What are they looking for in a job? And does this job that you're offering or that you have posted fit those things that motivate them, that they're very interested in? And I kind of think about that as it relates to, the point Brandon's bringing up there about somebody who's in education. And I think that's a great idea as far as the student teaching part, because education, accounting, like there are certain majors in college that when you get done, you're kind of like, that's where you're going, right? Like you just put your time in, your 4 years, and you
one or two things. You're either going to do what you just got your degree in, or you're going into sales. And right. And most people that are going into an accounting, for example, they don't want to, a lot of those are introverted. They really like to work with numbers and stuff like that. The last thing they want to do is to go into an extroverted sales type of a role. So you're right. I think Shawn's onto something to where go ahead and identify that. And again, for the listeners, we're using this as an example, but it's whether it's like you're talking about, John, identifying your why as like your personal why, or identifying those things early on in your mentorship or apprenticeship that get you excited, because maybe it is education, but maybe it's a specific thing within the educational field that you want to specialize in, right? Because maybe it's behavioral sciences or whatever that looks like. So I think the underlying thing is not whether it's teaching, accounting, or whatever. Understand yourself, and to take it back to what we were talking about earlier, is give yourself time to reflect on who you are and what makes you tick and what makes you happy, because all of those things still go back to what Shawn was kind of alluding to earlier.
Well, and when you talk about expectations, and one of the things that I do with my team as frequent as possible, I do it every single time I take over a new team. And you leaders out there, you coaches, you teachers, whoever, these are two really good questions to ask anybody that you're going to be dealing with on a continuum. Is what do you expect from me, and what do you think I expect from you? Because it's a really good opportunity for you to start to understand, and gives you a chance, because if they, depending on how they answer the question about what do you think I expect from you, you're going to now maybe potentially save them a lot of headaches down the road. Because if their expectation of what you're expecting is something completely different or off path, one, you're going to save yourself some headaches because you're getting aligned right away on the goals, but then also you're helping them kind of figure out like, oh, okay, this is, maybe I had a different opinion or a different impression of what, where this was headed. Now I can kind of help get myself, maybe I'm a little bit closer than I thought I was going to be with that. So it's something that's very interesting, because when you and I were talking about this today, we were talking about the impact that COVID has had on expectations as well. And, that personal expectation, like not only, what do I think is expected from me, but what am I expecting from myself? And it's kind of been a situation I was sharing with you where I feel like that time that we were home, working from home, I've noticed in my sales team that, when you're not out there every day and dressed up and ready to attack the day, and you're moving, getting out of the house and getting out in front of your customers and stuff like that, there's a little bit of a tendency to take your foot off the gas pedal a little bit.
Iron sharpens iron.
Exactly. Now, when you're out there and you're not doing that, you're not used to doing that every day. I mean, that was a year of losing some of that intensity that you have when you're face to face. And you and I were saying that, you've noticed the same thing even with students as well.
Yeah. And then there's an interesting study. They did it with Stephen Colbert, the late night talk show host. Yeah. And they were talking about how at the beginning, when they started doing the filming from his home and stuff, how he wasn't funny and how his ratings weren't good and how he didn't give off this likable persona. And it was that idea that you didn't have the immediate feedback from the other person. You couldn't see that body language. Right. People were literally rolling out of bed. Like, I have students and like you'd see them, they just like they lift up the pillow and they're like, all right, I'm here. And then you'd hear them snoring and that, the expectations of being a student and being a professional student, because that's their job right now. That they relaxed. And we talked about it earlier. Could, when you take the foot off the gas, can you necessarily get it back on? And we're seeing with a lot of students that, we have to change the clutch and change the gas pedal and, upgrade the unleaded and all of those things to reteach them how to get into this mode. And I think teachers weren't really prepared for that, because we were like, we're back in the classroom and we got kids and we're excited and we have an audience and we can perform. And the kids are like,
right.
But I did this all from home last year.
Right.
Yeah.
And why do I have to be here if I can do it from home? So it's interesting to see the perspectives on it.
Well, it's I was sharing with Shawn, Brandon, that one of the scary comments that I got was somebody was saying to me today, well, I think maybe COVID has just made me have a different appreciation for things. And I realized that, work's not as important as it used to be. And, it just helped me reevaluate the things in my life. And I'm thinking to myself, look, I get it, right? I mean, you spent some time at home. It's all good to make sure you're getting this appreciation for life. But at the same time, don't forget your goals. Like, don't forget the things that you are going to need, those just daily necessities. And I can tell you that with the goals you have as an individual, and it goes back to remembering your why, it doesn't start with sitting on the couch and being relaxed and thinking, okay, it's all going to come to me all of a sudden.
For sure it isn't. And I think the challenge that a lot of people that make statements like that, what they don't realize is how crippling it can be. I mean, there's a reason that suicide is up. There's a reason that clinical depression is up. People, we were made to be relational, right? Our whole faith system with Christianity is having a relationship with God and be able to speak to them and to him. And if you're not in relation with people, it is literally crippling. And so to me, when I hear people say that, and I don't know that person, obviously. And again, like Shawn said, we're not trying to put expectations on them or bring any of my thoughts in. Other than this, you're made to be relational. There's a difference between having a priority and being lazy. And I think what we have seen is a lot of malaise fall across our country. And that's for such a much larger, longer show. And Shawn, we'd love to have you back on for this one. But if you really start looking at the way that social media has allowed people to be isolated and allowed people to just get by with that isolation, the challenge though that you then have is, we weren't meant to live like that. So whatever this social experiment was that happened during COVID, whatever we learned as a socio economic type of a experiment, that I think it's safe to say we weren't meant to do what we experienced, right? Because you see it now. There's so much fatigue from the people that want to get out and the people that don't want to get out. And it's not just a political thing. It is
absolutely.
It is absolutely a cultural fundamental thing where people are going, no. I want to stay home. You showed me I can stay home, and you're going, no. We went through a chapter. You had to. That's not what you're supposed to do. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And it's time to get back to your normal. And to both of y'all's point, accelerate towards your goal. So to Shawn's point, go get the premium unleaded. Do what you have to do, but start to get back on path of acceleration so that you can live a healthy life.
So let me, because you just teed this up perfectly, and I'm going to bring this all back around to everybody, and it's going to tee up our last topic of the evening is what happens is, and at least in this situation I'm talking about, is you end up lowering your expectations of what you're going to can achieve, willing to achieve, all of those things. Needing to have that awareness that you have now lowered your expectations and that this is going to get you off the path of whatever goals that you previously had for yourself, whether that's to be the best school teacher you can be, whether that's to be the best salesperson you can be, whatever the case may be. But here's what I want to talk about, because when you lower those expectations and that tiredness and exhaustion comes in, that's where the burnout comes in. And it's something that's been very interesting. I was talking about this to both of you a little bit before the show. Is there's somebody that we follow on social media. His name is Matthias Barker, and you can find his work at MatthiasJBarker.com. He's a counselor, kind of a life coach type of individual. He actually has his own podcast called Consider Before Consuming. But Matthias has an ebook that I just received this afternoon, and it was all about unavoiding burnout. The title of the ebook was Unavoiding Burnout. I just want to read this one paragraph to you guys, because I think this is exactly what we're talking about. And it's something that is so important for the listeners, because with the awareness that is so critical in mental performance, if you find yourself going through some of these things that we're talking about right now, where you're just not as motivated as you used to be, you've lowered the expectations for yourselves, you kind of feel like you're experiencing some of that burnout, there is ways that you can get beyond that. So let me just read this one paragraph. So he says, sometimes exhaustion sinks deeper than your last night's sleep or the fatigue of daily circumstances. Maybe you're feeling a tiredness deep in your soul that's draining you, even though all the circumstances seem fine on the outside. Like the buckets that hold your motivation, vitality, happiness, or satisfaction have a leak. Maybe you're experiencing the early signs of burnout. What do you think about burnout and how we can be more aware of it, and then understanding that just because maybe you're feeling burned out doesn't mean that you no longer can become, it doesn't mean you have to lose the growth mindset. It doesn't mean you have to give up on these goals.
I think a lot of that has to do with gratitude, where like I was burnt out during COVID with remote and in person and all of that stuff. And I don't think there's anyone in my profession that wasn't. And I had this conversation with someone the other day. They're like, I'm so tired. I just, and I'm like, but we're here. Mm-hmm. We're here. Like, and I tell them, I'm like, imagine we got to go back to remote. Let's be grateful that we're here and use that little bit of energy. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a professional lacrosse player, and they were going to two-a-days, and he's injured, so he can't. He's going to miss this season. And we were just talking, and I was like, when those guys are dragging, go down and tell them, be like, listen, I wish I could be dragging right now. He's grateful that he's rehabbing and he's going to get another shot. So I think we need to stop, and that's that awareness of just stopping and make a list of what you're grateful for, and use that. I carry in my school bag every letter that I've ever received from a kid, every graduation picture I've ever received from a kid. And when I have really bad days, I go right to the little gratitude folder and I take it out and I read it. So I think we need to recognize gratitude again as an important part of our life.
I also think that there is a piece to this, and Brandon talks about this all the time with the Whoop band and different things like that, is the importance of sleep the importance of nutrition, the importance of exercise, the importance of taking care of yourself. Because, as I was listening to or reading this, a little bit of this excerpt from the ebook today, I started thinking about how sleep, tiredness in general becomes a great magnifier for any bad thing that's happening in life. Like, it's one of those things, like if you're in an argument, like you think about some of the most petty arguments you've ever gotten into with your spouse, in relationships with your kids, whatever the case may be, the underlying factor in some of these things is sleep. It's you're just tired, you're worn down.
It's a stressor, right? It's that you the sleep thing is critically important. But I think to go back real quick on the I think Shawn's right on the gratitude piece, but I think there's an important component to burnout, which is, and it goes back to being self-aware. You really need to understand, am I just mentally worn out and tired, or am I depressed? Like, is that something, we talk about mental health a lot. And what I want to make sure the listeners understand is that there are times that you can feel that burnout, and there may not be a tool in our bag that can pull you out of it. And you really need to seek help and seek professional help, right? And I know we do a lot with, promote a lot of China's AAAD and all that. But if you're a listener and you need help, seek help, right? And any of us that are on this podcast, send us an email. We'll certainly help you out however we can. But to the point that you're going to, John, I think anything, when you burn yourself out or burn yourself to the point of you can't recover, and that, whether that is sleep exhaustion, whether that's some type of a nutritional deficit, you hear people talk about all the time, I'm hangry. I mean, it's true, right? I mean, those types of things in our lives are multipliers. And so, again, on the self-awareness piece, and what I love that Shawn's talking about doing is, instead of allowing that thing to kind of drag us down, let me just pause for a second. Let me be mindful and grateful of what I do have, right? And let's, take advantage of the opportunity. You talk about TikTok. I saw a guy the other day, he was talking, and if I knew who it was, I'd give him credit for it. But he said, hey, if I gave you $10 million today, would you be happy? And the guy was like, yeah. And he goes, okay, what if I told you couldn't wake up tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
And the guy was like, what? No, never mind. It's not worth it. And so, his point is, well, so we've just established that waking up tomorrow is worth more than $10 million. So why are you not going to take advantage of waking up tomorrow? Right. And I think that's critically important. And Shawn hit it on the head with the gratitude piece.
Yeah. And I love it, because it all comes back to being aware of it. And then what we talk about all the time on this show is, when you sense yourself, because that's an excellent point about depression. One of the things that people don't realize is the physical nature of depression. It's not just emotional. It is a physical, literally, people, when those dopamine levels are so low, you cannot get yourself up off of the couch. Mm-hmm. Like you literally cannot. I've heard, I spent a lot of time in that behavioral health space in my job for a while. And those individuals who are suffering from depression are sitting on the couch, can watch their kids who they love so much playing on the floor with toys, and cannot physically get themselves off of the couch to go down and play with them. And it's one of those things, Brandon, I really want to underscore that's a difference between, there's a big difference between burnout, just not being motivated to do work anymore, or being frustrated and all of that, mm-hmm. than there is being depressed. And it is true. You do need to make sure you're in lots of tools on China's website, Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression Foundation, which is that AAADF.org, to be able to go and check those out. So, Shawn, how can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter, so you can just look up One Performance or Shawn O'Neal, and you'll be able to find me on there. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I've been doing a lot more on LinkedIn now.
Nice.
Just think it's a different audience.
Yeah, they're all in Ireland.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'll share something with you guys that I did with my classes. You talk about the cell phones. So I asked them to keep track of how much time they're on their phone each week. Okay. The average student in my class, 56 hours a week.
What?
Yeah. Ask your teenagers to look at your phones. And I was like, do you guys realize that you're spending 2 days a week
On
watching someone else's life?
Wow.
And you're taking away from yours. And it is amazing because I will literally have kids now walk into my room and leave their phone on my desk. They're like,
Unbelievable.
Because they became aware of how bad it is. And we talked about last year, that was everything on the phone.
Yeah.
You know, and that, like, I was horrified when they were telling. I figured it'd be like 2-3 hours to 8 hours. I had one kid 16 hours a day.
Oh my gosh. So it goes back to, like John's saying. So when do you sleep? When do you prepare yourself to push for those goals?
Yeah.
Can you even have a goal? If take 10% of that, take 6 hours a week and go play the violin. Imagine how good you could be if you gave 10% of your life back to yourself.
Yeah. So that's what we're working on now.
Wow.
Well, you know, it's a you just made me think about something I meant to talk about earlier. It was about this idea that the other piece of awareness is the strategy I'm using actually going to get me to where I'm wanting to go? Because the person, the article I was reading, that Matthias Barker, he was talking about how, you know, in a technical sense, burnout is that understanding that the strategy you are using is actually getting you further away from your goal. Like it's counterproductive. Yeah. Because and that sometimes can be the thing, is it might not be that you are no longer capable of reaching that goal and you just feel like the need to give up. It may just be that what you're doing isn't working for you in the simplest terms. Sure. And it's really important that you understand that and are aware of it, because that's that awareness piece of, like, you know, to everything y'all are saying there about the students and stuff. But I just think about the society that we're in now, with what I worry about the most is our swiftness in ready to give in and just give up on things. Like, you know, if we try something for a little while, it doesn't work. And instead of, it used to be, you know, hey, and let me just think of a different way to do this. Now it just seems like it's so easy to be like, well, I guess that didn't work.
Well, it goes back, and again, you know, I know we're trying to wrap up, but it goes back to a much bigger conversation, which is, as a society and as a culture, what has social media done to us to think that the opportunity we have in front of us today, if I go beyond that and the thought is there's always another opportunity. There's always a side hustle. There's always this, there's always that. There's very few people that have the burn the ships mentality of, hey, this is it, my guy. Like, we're coming to shore and we're either going to conquer this thing or we're leaving in a body bag, but there is no getting back on the ship. Right. So
no retreat,
no retreat at all. So
great last word there and last thought. And Shawn, man, we can't thank you enough. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And we thank you just not for your presence here, but just for the support. It's always so great. I always get a text the day after shows, or you know, comment about one of the books we talked about on the show, and I'll share those with Brandon. So we just appreciate you being with us for a very long time on this thing, but always welcome.
It's always a learning opportunity. Every single, except for the ones that I'm on. My ones are kind of boring.
No. I can't see.
Don't kid yourself.
That's when I send John the text and go, man, that dude's awesome.
We always talk about the fact we wish we had teachers like you when we were in school. So
I might
hopefully you're raising one.
Yeah, there you
so.
go, Brandon.
We'll see.
Yeah, next generation.
See. That's it.
Maybe she'll come up and shadow you one day. Come up to New York.
Yeah, we can do that.
Bring them up.
Awesome, man. Well, guys, Shawn O'Neal, you found out where you can find him on social media. Definitely worth checking out. Absolutely. Because Shawn's always got his finger on the pulse of everything happening with mental performance, and a great guy and the best guest co-host we've ever had.
Had. I mean, ever.
It was so good you never did
unanimous.
It again. Pete, done.
Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
Well, Shawn, thanks. Have a great night, man. We appreciate you.
You too. See you later, guys.
All right, see you.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John.cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at John.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.